Hi, everybody from Mission Control. This is Josh Byerly. I'm joined by my friend Heather Paul, spacesuit engineer here. We are going to be talking to Memorial School there in Atlanta, Georgia. I think we have quite a number of students here. They're going to be talking to Heather about all sorts of things. So if you guys are ready, we're ready for your questions.
Hi, my name is Sophie McMahon. My question is, if there are several astronauts from different countries on the International Space Station, then do they have to learn a central language to be able to communicate with each other?
I think that's a great question. And in fact, a huge part of what is so fantastic about the International Space Station is that word international. With all of our different collaborations across the world, it really is an international effort. And you're absolutely right. We have a very diverse population of astronauts, not only from the United States, but across a variety of countries. And so English is the standard language, although a lot of our U.S. astronauts do learn Russian, and some learn Japanese as well. So it's good to learn your foreign languages while you're in school, because when you become an astronaut, you're going to need to be able to work across those cultural bounds while you're in space.
Hello, my name is Makai Stevens McGlam, and I want to know that how detectable is a leak in a spacesuit?
I don't think I quite heard that question.
How detectable is a leak in a spacesuit? I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good question and a really important one, because the spacesuit is basically like a big human-shaped balloon that's keeping you alive during your spacewalk, and so you definitely don't want to get any leaks or rips or tears. But if you were, we have all of these sensors that are kind of monitoring the health of the spacesuit. And so if there was any kind of a leak or a tear, those sensors would detect it, because you'd feel, or the sensors would detect that change in pressure. And we have emergency oxygen, a separate oxygen tank that's high pressure. And so if the sensors kick that on, basically it floods the spacesuit with high pressure oxygen, and an astronaut could survive for approximately 30 minutes. And really what he or she would try to do is get inside as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Hello, my name is Miles, and I would like to know, how do you take a shower in space?
Oh, Miles, that's an excellent question. We all really think about hygiene, and if you're on a long camping trip, you're definitely thinking about when you can get in the hot shower. But our astronauts, water doesn't behave the same way it does here on Earth, and they have to be very careful with their water management, because water basically, because of the surface tension, creates these small bubbles, or sometimes big bubbles, that can float around just like the humans and the equipment around them. And so we don't take a shower like we would here on Earth, because basically all of those water bubbles would be floating around you. So they do kind of like dry shampoo techniques, kind of sponge bath style things. And
like wet wipes like you find here on Earth.
Exactly, yeah. Now the great thing about the space station, though, is you don't really get that dirty.
No.
It's not like you're getting really hot and sweaty up there. So, I mean, they stay fairly clean.
Good afternoon. My question is, so you know how they say you're in the free fall and you're already floating in the air? How do you jump? Because in space, the people, they be jumping, but they said they're already in the free fall and they're already levitating.
So basically, because we're free falling in space, I guess it's more about how do you jump and do things like that. Well, when we're in space, we train our astronauts to really be very careful with how hard they push off of the walls or the floors. And in fact, there really is no up or down, ceiling or floor. And we call it fingertip forces, really just very light touches to move in any direction, because you're free falling and you're in that microgravity environment. It really doesn't take a lot of effort to move yourselves around. And a lot of times when we have our rookie astronauts who it's their first flight, we've done a lot of training, but even sometimes they'll still think they really have to push off like we do here when we're moving on Earth. And it takes some time to get used to that feeling of just being gentle with your touch to move around. Now, on the moon, when we were on the moon back in the Apollo era, they had to work a little bit more, it was a little more challenging of an environment because of the reduced gravity environment that's about 1/6 what we have here on Earth. So there, they had to work pretty hard to move around, but part of that was because they were typically outside doing their science and work in their spacesuits, and they had that heavy equipment on. Good question.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I need to know that if there is an emergency, is there a place for them to go, or what would happen?
Excellent question, Emily. You know, NASA really thinks a lot about the safety of our astronauts, and you know, something could go wrong, just like we have things that go wrong here on Earth, and we have to have little safe havens to go to. In the International Space Station, we do have an aircraft that they could climb into if they need to evacuate. They have a lot of different procedures, but the first thing that we always try to do is figure out what has actually happened. And the astronauts are really well trained, and we've got a great set of flight controllers here that are trained and ready to support in case of an emergency. But absolutely, there is a vehicle that they can climb into and evacuate if they need to.
And there's three big emergencies they really train for a lot. They do drills. It's fire. If there's some kind of fire on board, there's depressurization, like the leak we talked about before, and some sort of toxic, if there's something, you know, nasty that gets released inside there. Those are the three big things that they really do sort of train over and over for and get ready to go if they had to. It's a good question.
Good afternoon. My name is Taraya. I wanted to ask, what special materials do you use to make spacesuits?
I don't think I heard that question.
Yeah, can you say that again a little bit louder?
Speak louder, like I'm talking. Project your voice, baby.
What special materials do you use to make spacesuits?
Oh, good question.
Awesome. That's a great question. And actually, I have some spacesuit pieces with me today. So, well, let's start with what you wear on the inside of your suit. And you know, our astronauts are working outside on a spacewalk for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours at a time. And it really is like exercising the whole time. And you know, when you exercise a lot or you're in your gym classes, you start to get a little hot and sweaty. So we want to make sure that the astronauts stay nice and cool inside of the suit. And so we put you in a stretchy undergarment. I like to call this your spacesuit underwear. Because you wear it under your spacesuit, and it's a big cooling garment, kind of like thermal underwear, like you'd wear if you were going skiing. Spandex, so it sits nice and tight across your skin, and then you can see that there's plastic tubing woven through it, and we run ice cold water through that to keep our astronauts cool. So your spacesuit underwear is a little bit like spandex, kind of like the underwear we wear here on Earth.
Yeah.
Now, once you're prepared for your spacewalk and you're in your cooling garment, the spacesuit itself is actually made out of a lot of different material layers. And actually, Josh, if you don't mind holding up the boot, that's right, we've got a boot, and then I've got a glove here. You need a lot of materials for the spacesuit for a variety of reasons. Number one, remember I said it's kind of like a big human-shaped balloon, and it's holding in that oxygen and pressure. So that internal layer that you can see here, this yellow layer, is what we call a bladder. It holds that oxygen in. Then the second layer is the one that makes it look almost to the shape of a human. It's a layer that we can sew. And then the final layers are all the insulation, kind of like the happy birthday balloons that you buy at the store that are that aluminized mylar, really shiny, or kind of like aluminum foil but a little bit lighter weight. And they have reflective properties, and they insulate, and that's why you have so many different materials. And I'm wearing the glove now, and it's really like wearing a big ski glove or several pairs of gloves. It is in fact pretty challenging to move around, so we want to make sure that when we size you for a suit, we get it right and it fits comfortably. Excellent question. Thumbs up to you.
Hi, my name is Christopher English, and my question is, if the International Space Center and space got hit with an asteroid or a meteorite, what would the astronauts do?
If the International Space Station was to get
hit
hit
by
by
a
a
meteoroid or
meteorite,
something, yeah.
what would our astronauts
Yeah.
do? Well, you know, actually, I had the opportunity to talk with Ron Guerin, who was one of our astronauts who lived on board the space station. And during his particular mission, they did have a situation where we had something that was going to fly by, and it seemed like it was going to get pretty close to the space station. And he shared with me that they had to go through all of their procedures and actually kind of lock out certain aspects or certain areas or modules of the space station and start to move into that safe haven environment. Now, luckily, nothing happened, and in fact, what was the object that was flying by was actually farther away than we anticipated. But that is something that they do train for, and again, they would basically lock down parts of the space station, get it prepared, and then they'd probably move into one of those vehicles.
And we track, so there's a lot of stuff up there in space flying around, you know, meteor and pieces of, you know, satellite junk and things like that. So we track it, and we usually have a pretty good idea if something's even getting kind of close. So it's a pretty good system that works.
Hello, my name is Imani Williams, and my question is, what is the special training that people behind the scenes of the astronaut do?
Wow, that is a great question, Imani. And in fact, for every astronaut that's on board the station, we have a very huge team of people that are here on the ground supporting them. Engineers like me, flight controllers like Josh, who sit here in mission control, and not only in this big room that we're in right now, but all of the back rooms and our labs and facilities. And so we have to go through a lot of training. It's kind of like going back to school. So to be a flight controller, it can take several years, and you have to do these really interesting things called simulations. And these are the hardest tests you'll ever take because they are true simulations of what could go wrong if you were manning or monitoring the space station. And they're kind of fun. They're a little scary. But once you pass all of the written tests and you work through your simulations and you really pass a lot of exams, so to speak, then you get certified to be a flight controller. Now, engineers like me who aren't necessarily certified to be a flight controller, we still work in the back room supporting the folks that are here in the Mission Control Center, and we're kind of the hardware providers. So the people who are monitoring the health of the spacesuit or monitoring the equipment on the space station, we go through kind of a different type of training where we run a lot of our own chamber tests and evaluations. So my particular engineering team, we have a lot of different chambers that can either simulate the temperatures on the space station, the vacuum environment of space, or a combination of the two. And so we do a lot of testing of our hardware, and that's how we train for our missions.
And one thing you guys should know, if you ever want to come work for NASA, we take all kinds of people. So whatever you want to study in college, just go for something that you find interesting, that you want to. Heather's background's engineering, mine's communication, so she had to do a lot of math and science. Yes. I'm not very good at math and science, so I had to do a lot of writing and things such as that. So it takes all sorts of people to make this huge place kind of work and support the space station and everything else that NASA does. So we take all types.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
Hello, my name is Deja, and my question is, if I were to become an astronaut, how long will it take, and what all do I have to go through?
Wow. Okay. Well, just like I talked about, it's like going back to school to become a flight controller to sit in the Mission Control Center. When you're an astronaut, the first few years, you are really, it's like you're back in school. But the school is pretty fun. You get to train in our mock-ups. You get to meet engineers just like myself and work with all different kinds of people and learn about the different systems on the space station. And you also get to do a lot of emergency things. They teach you all about survival aspects. In fact, they go camping and they have to learn how to do all kinds of survival aspects. And so it's really fun. So those first few years, you're really just learning how to be a good team member, learning about survival, learning about, just more general systems. And then once you get selected for a mission, then it's really hardcore. You have to train with your team day in and day out, work in your simulations. You work in the sims, the simulations, just like the flight controllers. You travel a lot. They have to go to Russia. Sometimes they go to Japan because remember, we've got all those international partners. So there's facilities around the world that our astronauts get to travel to train. And so it can take several years, even once you first get selected, just to go through that initial training. And then your mission-specific training can be even more years. But it's definitely well worth it because once you fly in space, you are so prepared for that flight.
Yeah. You can do anything.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Naya, and I wanted to know what protects the space station from satellite pieces or meteorites.
That's a great question, Naya. And as Josh mentioned, we actually monitor a large majority of the space debris and space hardware that's out there. So we really track the position of all of these different pieces of equipment and space debris. So we kind of know if there's going to be a situation where...
Coming close.
Yeah, there's something coming close.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Terry. How are astronauts chosen for space?
Wow. Well, it really depends on a number of factors. Number one, I think the biggest thing that we look for when we're selecting astronauts is that this is going to be someone who can work well on a team. Because every astronaut relies on his or her teammates and crew while they're on board the space station to really help each other out, go through whatever mission priorities you have to do. But really, they also become kind of a family. You know, it's a small group of people living in space for months at a time. So we really make sure that the people we select are willing to work on a team and work well on a team. And then really the rest of the aspects depend on what missions we think we're going to select them for. And we look for a nice diverse variety of different careers. So we have astronauts who are engineers, we have astronauts who are scientists, we have astronauts who are doctors, we have astronauts who are teachers. And really what we look for is someone who not only wants to do what they're doing in their career, but really has a higher goal of helping us work on our exploration tasks. I mean, that's what everyone who works here at NASA, that's what we're focused on. Living in space on board the space station, doing fantastic science with scientists around the world, but then also looking beyond at what we can do when we go someplace, maybe back to the moon or onto Mars or to an asteroid.
Yeah.
Good. I hope you're thinking about being an astronaut.
Thanks, Luca.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlie, and what makes spacesuits resistant to UV rays?
Oh, wow, good question. Well, so you can see here, this outer layer that I have and that Josh has with the boot is the color white. And so that white is chosen for a few reasons. Number one, we want to be able to see the astronauts when they're outside. So the easiest color to see against the black backdrop of space is in fact white. The other thing is that there's a little bit of temperature control we can do. You know, in Atlanta, I grew up there, so I know it gets hot there in the summertime. And on a hot summer day, if you had the choice between wearing a white t-shirt or a black t-shirt and you're going to be outside in the sun all day, most likely you'll choose the white one to keep you a little bit cooler. That's because the black color will absorb the sun and absorb the temperature, whereas white is a little bit more reflective. So that's part of it. Now, as far as the UV and radiation protection, the number of layers that we have here gives you some protection. You have also on the helmet, you have basically a spray-coated layer of gold that's going to protect your eyes. That's going to be just like your sunglasses that have some kind of protective properties. But a big thing that we do to protect you from radiation is we just monitor your exposure over the duration of your life. So they actually wear a little sensor inside of their spacesuit that's monitoring how much radiation you're absorbing. And even in the International Space Station, when they're inside, they're still getting some exposure. So we just monitor that over your time, your life. You're welcome.
My name is Ben, and I was wondering, what does the astronaut's daily schedule look like?
Wow, that's a good question. An astronaut's day schedule on the International Space Station, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
it's so okay. Well, one thing you need to know is that there's somebody here in Mission Control. There's all sorts of people that do different jobs here in Mission Control, and one of them is called the Ops Planner, and they sit right back over here, kind of close to where we are, and they plan the astronauts and the cosmonauts' days in sometimes 5-minute increments. So you can imagine if you're going to school for 8 or 9 hours a day, somebody planning your day within 5 minutes. I mean, it's a very specific schedule, and they do everything from cleaning things on board the space station. I mean, you're living up there, that's your house. You have to keep it clean. They, they have time to talk to their families. But the biggest thing that they're doing is a lot of science and research, and that takes many, many hours every week to do that. So there's actually a look at the ops planner here in Mission Control. He's waving at the camera to you guys. So these guys stay very busy, and they plan it a day in advance. And, the crew stays pretty busy up there on board the International Space Station as they do all this science and just keeping the thing running too. So it's a good question.
Hello, my name is Ezekiel, and when you're in a spaceship and when you pour water to drink it, and the water becomes a bubble, can the water still evaporate?
That's a great question. I talked earlier about how the surface properties of water, the surface tension, makes the water molecules all kind of stick to each other, and they become these really cool bubbles. And I know the astronauts like to have fun with that sometimes with their water and their juice drinks.
Yeah.
They'll actually squeeze
Yeah.
the juice pack, and a little bubble will form, just like a bubble like you'd blow here on Earth with the soapy water, except it's full of water. And so that's why when you watch on the International Space Station, we actually have to package all of the fluids that they drink in these foil packs. They kind of look like a juice
Yeah,
pouch,
juice pack, yeah.
and that's why the fluid has to be contained. And even when they're heating up their food, they actually pour it out of a little spout. They actually put it right into the food package. So we don't really want that water floating around unintentionally. So sometimes they do play with it, but a lot of times they just drink it right out of their juice pouch.
They also can't have sodas up there too, which is probably a reason why I would never be an astronaut. But they can't, because the carbonation in the bubbles, it just doesn't work. So they have to stick with coffee and tea and orange juice and things like that. But yeah, no soda.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Miles Gordon, and I wanted to know, are there alternate power sources on the International Space Station?
That's a good question.
Yeah, there are a lot of power sources on the space station. In fact, so the big solar arrays are a big power draw. We also have a lot of batteries. I mean,
Yeah.
we use batteries in the spacesuit, but then you're kind of on your own independent system. And in fact, for future exploration, we're looking at a variety of different power systems, not only batteries or solar arrays, but maybe things that are regenerable systems. So power's a big thing we have to think about.
The batteries are huge on board the International Space Station, and like Heather said, they've got these huge solar arrays that are just enormous. I mean, they're bigger than a football field, really, from top to bottom. But it still has to have batteries, because the space station is only in the daylight a certain amount of time, and then it's in the dark. And when it's in the dark, obviously the sun's not there; it's not gathering energy, so it has to really rely on those batteries that are out there that have been charged during the previous. It does it 16 times a day. So basically, whenever the space station is in the nighttime pass, it has to rely on those batteries to power everything on board. So it's kind of a whole very fancy system to keep this thing running.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nayana. I want to know, what material do they make the space helmets with? Like the glass on it?
Very good. Well, it's actually not made of glass at all. Glass, if you break glass, it forms these really sharp edges and pieces, and you don't want that when you're wearing something like this that is pressurized and keeping you alive for your spacewalk. So it's actually made out of kind of a fancy type of plastic material that has some protective properties to it. And you've got basically an inner visor that's holding the pressure in, and then an outer visor, because sometimes they do tend to bump their heads a little bit. I mean, you're moving around, it's a little bit, you've got all this material around you, and so you have that second layer that's there to kind of protect you from scratches and any cracks in the helmet. And then when they're on the sunny side of the planet, they pull down an outside visor, and that's the visor I mentioned earlier that has that layer of gold on it to act as your spacesuit sunglasses. So definitely not made of glass, but a variety of different plastic materials.
And I had one other question.
Okay.
There was the dehydrated shrimp there. When you dehydrate meat, doesn't it lose nutrition? When you dehydrate the food, doesn't it lose nutritional value?
That is a really interesting question. And actually, the nutrition, we have a group of people here. So I imagine several of you probably like food, right? I would imagine, yep. Okay, well, we have a group of people here that are dedicated food scientists, and all they do is figure out how to make foods that are better for you, more nutritious and tasty in space. And so, absolutely, I mean, they're always looking at the nutritional aspects of the food. Now, dehydrating the food, I haven't heard if that actually reduces the value at all.
I've never heard of that.
I don't think it would, because you're basically just pulling out the moisture.
Yeah.
But it's possible that maybe you lose a little bit when you dehydrate
They
it.
probably make up for that. You know, people smarter than us in terms of cooking food in space probably know that a little bit better than we do. But you know, they measure calorie content and fat content and sugar and stuff like that. I mean, the astronauts have a very, they get to pick and choose what they want to eat, but they watch it fairly closely in terms of what their diet is, because they're watching everything from muscle and bone loss, and they're having to exercise. I mean, they really watch what these crews do, and to make sure they're healthy, and whenever they come back after 5 or 6 months, that they're ready to be back on the planet.
Their menu's pretty diverse, though. I mean, they love pizza, macaroni and cheese,
Yeah.
shrimp cocktail.
Most of the food's pretty good. Their taste buds tend to kind of get a little off whenever they're up there. So things that are spicy and taste stronger here on Earth, and that's what they typically like. So I think we've got time for one more.
Hi, my name is Comfort. I want to ask, is it true that you're actually going to create a city in Mars?
Say that again one more time.
I asked, is it true that you're actually going to create a city in Mars?
Are we going to create a city on Mars? You know,
Hope so.
that is a great question to end on, because it really is something that we're looking at. Where are we going to go next? You know, we've been to the moon, but I don't think we've quite finished the job there. I think we have a lot more science and research to do. We've got people on the space station right now helping us to do a lot of science and really understand the effects of living in space for a long time. But, you know, we might go back to the moon, but we've got rovers on Mars right now that are basically being our little science buddies, and they're trying to check things out and help us determine if there's enough resources, if there's water, maybe even signs of life currently or past signs of life, to decide if that's a place that humans really want to go, not only to visit and do science, but maybe eventually to live. You know, and we have some science teams and engineering teams that have looked at how to colonize places like the moon or Mars. So that is kind of a study that we've been doing, and we'll just have to stay tuned and see what happens with it. But we've got our rover buddies up there right now, so way to go, Curiosity. And certainly we've got teams here at NASA that are interested in doing those kinds of things. So, but you guys are going to be the ones that'll make that kind of mission possible. So definitely stay in school, study hard. You know, as Josh mentioned, we have a lot of different careers here at NASA. So if science and math isn't your thing, that's okay. We still need you.
Yeah.
So think about how you can contribute to these future missions. It's a pretty exciting time to do space exploration.
Yeah. So we want to thank you guys. Thank Heather for coming in here and answering your questions. So to all of our friends there in Atlanta at Memorial Middle School, we say thank you very much. If you're ever in Houston, come by and say hi sometime, and we probably need to let you guys get back to class. So thanks again.
Bye. Thank you.